Hello, everyone, and welcome to another podcast interview. Today, I have a pleasure of speaking with Adele Wimsett, who is women's health practitioner. Hello, Adele.
Hello.
Thank you so much for joining me here, Adele. And I'm really excited about talking with you. And we just had a conversation before we started recording. And it's such a hot topic, really, looking at the hormones, looking at the how it impacts us as women. It's very personal to each one of us. And I think maybe the best place to start will be for you to tell us a little bit about your work.
Yeah, I actually had a background in children's services where I specialised in female offending. But my
Mm.
interest had always been health. It was my hobby. I was always training to be something, whether it was a Reiki master or crystal healing or something. I was always into health and wellness. And felt like I was quite up to speed and up to date on the most up to date science. I say that I bridge the science and the sacred because they're very much the two parts of me. And so I loved the research and information around how to stay well. So adopted a lot of practices like fasting, ketogenic diets, fasted exercise, raw vegan diets, and eventually my period vanished. And I thought that can't be good. So
Mm.
what I went to the science, I discovered that lots of the information we're given medically and in the health world is based on research into a male physiology. And that made me very angry. So I then embarked on a journey to train to become a women's health practitioner, which basically means I fix hormones. So when there are symptoms, hormones affect everything. They're the most powerful biochemicals in the body. They are multi-systemic. The brain is covered in receptors for them. We're not just talking about periods here. And I made it my mission to empower as many women as possible with this knowledge so they didn't have to go through what I went through. And then in recent years, this has evolved into me having a specialist interest in ADHD and hormones. Because of my own diagnosis a few years ago, again, I went to the research to see how my hormones were affecting my traits, and there was basically nothing there. So, again, I embarked on a mission to gather what I could and create a space for women to understand this, and have just completed my own 3-month study into perimenopause and ADHD. That was
Mm.
a nutshell of my journey of getting here, but I fix hormones.
Yeah, I absolutely love what you just said because I think so many women don't realize this, do they? That a lot of research is done on males' bodies.
Hmm.
And when you think about the 50% of population are women, and women are prescribed a lot of medication, and there is a lot of kind of procedures and techniques that women are expected to use and follow. And if it is not designed for women's bodies,
Yeah,
then it
it's
will
not.
be doing harm, just like what you experienced.
Absolutely. We operate in a misogynistic medical system that is acknowledged. Our own government acknowledges we have this, and women are getting a really poor deal as a result. We get treated like small men. Even lab rats tend to be male. Okay. So we know that women are much more likely to have side effects to medication, but that doesn't get considered. We just have this knowledge that it gets applied to our body and it's different. And then there's this sort of the trauma that comes with dealing with a medical system that doesn't understand our bodies. We're quite often gaslit in our experiences. Lots of
Mm.
women in my community don't want to go to their GP because they know they're going to get an inner eye roll, be told they know better, not be heard, not be validated, and not be offered any effective solutions or understanding what's happening. So I think we really need to acknowledge the difficult experience women have dealing with these systems
Mm.
because of excluding us from this research, largely because it's more expensive to research us because we fluctuate hormonally. Okay. So it becomes a bit more complex with this fluctuation.
So tell that it would be really great for you to tell us a little bit. I am personally really interested in that study that you just
Mm.
completed
Yeah.
because I am in a full-blown perimenopause. And before we started, I was saying to you, like, perimenopause is kicking my ass, really kicking my ass. And my mood
Mm.
is okay,
Yeah.
but it's the hot flashes and the night sweats and the then interrupted sleep and then
Yeah.
the energy levels that I have during
Mm.
the day. So I'd love to hear more. What have you learned? What
Mm.
have you learned that women
Oh,
normally don't realize?
so I think it's really important to acknowledge the hormones affect everything. Okay, it's multi-systemic. It's that it playing out on every element of the body, the gut microbiome, skin elasticity, immunity, mood, sleep, energy, all of it is being affected. And perimenopause is a season of recalibration. Everything is recalibrating, your metabolism, your brain, your soul, everything is going through this recalibration process. Now, I became curious about looking at this season for ADHD women, but it affects all women as well, because this is a time that we know lots of women are getting diagnosis. And estrogen is the hormone that gets all the spotlight. And my favorite hormone ever is progesterone. And she doesn't get the spotlight she deserves. So I call estrogen the party girl. Okay. When she's in the right levels for your body and she's behaving herself, she is the party girl that will make you sociable and sexy and confident. She'll sensitize your dopamine and serotonin. She is wonderful. However, too much partying makes us feel like crap. So nature has given us the balance, if we are ovulating and if our adrenals are functioning well, to produce progesterone. So if estrogen is the party girl, progesterone is like the mama who comes back to the house party and says, party's over, calm down and go to sleep. Okay, so she sensitizes a neurotransmitter called GABA, which is what relaxes us. Whereas estrogen sensitizes glutamate, which is excitatory, which is stimulating. Okay, we need to be very careful with estrogen because she can cause problems in the body if she's not kept in check. So we see things like fibroids, these estrogenic linked conditions like endo and adenomyosis, not that they're caused by estrogen, but they're affected by it. She's a proliferator, she's anabolic, can be quite inflammatory. So she's like the fire, whereas progesterone is like the water that goes calm everything down. So we need this balance. Now, when we're seeing these traits really flaring up in women and actually women's mood generally changing late 30s, early 40s, this is progesterone deficiency. Okay. And we're not noticing that this is what's happening because we don't make the link with this being perimenopause because it isn't a hot flash or a dry vagina. It's about mood. And this is happening from our late 30s. We're not ovulating so much. So progesterone declines, which means estrogen dominates. Doesn't mean you're producing too much. It just means that she's not being kept in check by the mama. Okay. So what we start to see is reduction in bandwidth. Things that would never have overwhelmed us before start to overwhelm us. Things women often say, I don't understand why I'm getting anxious about driving. I used to drive all over the place, or going to a place that I need to check there's parking. I'm thinking, what? Doing this? Sleep isn't as restorative. We might find ourselves getting anxious about things, this inner scratchiness, not being able to be really present with life and thinking, why am I not enjoying this? It's not a depression. It's just not being able to hook into the experience. Now, what happens here when we see this profile picture, you're not getting the mood stabilization and nervous system regulation that progesterone provides. That's shipped out. What should happen is that our adrenals pick this up in perimenopause and produce enough estrogen and progesterone for us not to be symptomatic. We'll never produce the levels that ovaries did, but we should have enough. The problem for our generation, which science shows, is we are the most chronically stressed generation of women that have existed. We were told the lie that we could have the education, the career, the Pinterest-worthy houses, all the staff look after our health, make sure we're socializing, all these things. And we are entering perimenopause with our adrenals being whacked. And therefore, when the ovaries knock on the door of the adrenals and say, please, can you take over? They're like, absolutely not. I'm barely staying on top of my stress hormone production. That's the priority. See you later. So we are left as a generation in this season experiencing a huge amount of symptoms. And this tends to be worse. The science shows us ADHD women tend to have a much worse perimenopause, much more prone to PMDD, much more prone to postnatal depression. And this is the hormones. So we don't have the protective benefits of the progesterone. Estrogen's dominating. And then this is where it gets really interesting, is ADHD people tend to have more of a tendency towards histamine issues. We don't know why, but we know. And also in perimenopause, lots of women find they suddenly start getting hay fever and allergies. This is because that progesterone acts like an antihistamine and it's not there. Estrogen feeds histamine and histamine feeds estrogen. So this estrogen dominant pattern is flaring up histamine. And it doesn't mean you're going to be sneezing and getting hives, but your mood might feel awful. You might just feel meh. It can affect your sleep. It can make you feel anxious. So we then have that on top. And then with ADHD people, we tend to see genetic issues around how we methylate, how we detox estrogen. And this turns them into estrogen gremlins, which have a massive impact on mood. And all of the women I saw in the study had this element of this, and we couldn't test the genetic testing, but everything else we had there. And the women who did have this data, it showed an issue with this. So no wonder the lid comes off in perimenopause, right? You look at that within this multi-systemic effect, all it causing the neuroinflammation, flaring everything up. Here we are. The strategies don't work, the lid falls off.
Oh my God, Adele, I wish we had this conversation a few years back, because you just described most of the stuff, if not all, that I've been experiencing. I've always had a really bad allergies, always had a lot of PMT, always had those mood swings that were definitely hormonally related. And in my perimenopause, it's all coming out. It's just, it's flooding me continuously. I find it really interesting what you just said about this connection with the ADHD and neurodivergence and the hormonal kind of stuff. And can you say a little bit more about that?
Yeah. So what we tend to see is we have got little bits of research coming out now, which is really nice. Previously, we only really had one in 2018, whereas in the last couple of years, some of this research is coming out, which is really only validating what we knew. But the relationship is I don't think there's a definitive answer of what ADHD is. I think people have always had this kind of brain throughout human evolution. It's just that the environment we're living in right now is like sending it crazy. It's on steroids because we're not meant to live like this. But the relationship with the hormones is that we know in ADHD, there's something with neurotransmitters, dopamine, serotonin predominantly. Are we not producing enough, or do we detox it too quickly? So the brain's always looking for more. There's something here with it. But what we do know is that estrogen sensitizes dopamine and serotonin, so it makes it work better, just like the progesterone sensitizes the GABA to calm it all down. So this is really important to know as a neurodivergent woman. You need to know if you're ovulating. You need to know what is happening with your hormones by tracking and looking at what's going on. You can use an at-home testing kit like Mirror to see what's happening, or you can track your traits, and we analyze that with menstrual cycle awareness, because you see this dance. Because what happens is when the estrogen goes higher, when you're regularly menstruating and ovulating, women tend to do quite well there, assuming there's not massive histamine or methylation issues. So they do hit the traits are being supported. We're feeling really good. I see her that phase as a bit like the 1990s businesswoman in Prada glasses, Louboutin shoes. She's on it and she's doing well. So we feel good generally. But then it drops off. So there's a piece of research that shows, they call it estrogen withdrawal, and this is where we can see heightened, otherwise perimenopausal was just dropped out of my head, hyperactive traits. There we go. We had an ADHD peri moment there. So the hyperactive traits go up in that phase, which means we can see things like positive aggression, substance misuse, these kind of risk-taking behaviors can go up here. Then in the last phase, as we then go into the luteal phase closer to the bleed, we see a flare up of inattentive traits, and it's thought that might be linked through to this. There's a second estrogen rise there, and then that withdraws. And this seasons of estrogen withdrawing in this piece of research is thought to be triggering of the traits. I think there's a lot more to understand around progesterone and to be looked at. She never gets a look at in research, which drives me nuts. But I think we can't ignore hormones when we are looking at ADHD traits. There's another one with prolactin, which is plays a role again with traits. It's one it's produced in the brain, and if it goes high due to stress, it will stop dopamine working properly. You can have simple blood tests to have a look. Have I got high prolactin? That could be affecting the amount of dopamine you've got. So it's really important that we're looking at the hormones and how they're supporting neurotransmitters and therefore affecting our trait.
I love that. Thank you. Thank you. It's something definitely recently we are talking loads more, and more women are being diagnosed with ADHD and neurodiversity. It's certainly something that in the past it was mostly focused on the boys and young men. So there is definitely a shift here. So You are also, I have a pleasure of working with you in our trauma-informed somatic teacher and coach for women certification. And I wanted to ask you, like, where does the material that we are covering in the training, how does that fit in with the work that you are doing?
So the reason I wanted to do the course with you was because clinically I can get women so far with their hormones, but cortisol is the queen bee. She sits at the top of the hormone hierarchy. And if cortisol is not regulated through the adrenals, then the whole system just keeps going out of whack. For example, when we are stressed, the body will steal progesterone to turn it into cortisol. So we see this pattern. So we become progesterone. We might be beautifully ovulating, producing lots of progesterone, but if we're stressed, we'll become progesterone deficient. So you might have a heavier, gnarly period that month. And that's why, because estrogen's dominating. So progesterone plays such an important role, and we need her to feel good. So we have to support the adrenals. And most of us aren't. We're wired, we're overworked, we're overstimulated.
Yeah.
Particularly, I see in neurodivergent women, we have a much more sensitive nervous system. We're on all the time. So if I wanted to do the course so I could weave in the somatic work clinically to give women tools to be able to utilize in their life and start to manage their adrenal function.
I love that. So it's actually, that means that you're working on different levels with women. You're giving
Yeah.
them information, you're supporting them on a hormonal level, and then you're giving them tools and understanding on that more somatic level,
Yeah.
something that they can do for themselves for the
Yeah.
nervous system regulation.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. Are there any practices that you find that from the training, for example, are there any practices that you find that you can share with your clients that would be really easy for them to pick up and practice as they go on?
So I've started calling it a conscious check-in with lots of women have an afternoon crash, like 2, 3, 4 o'clock. This is your blood sugar regulation, right? And it's like hitting a wall of fatigue where you could literally curl up on the floor and just go, I'm out. So what I teach them to do is getting ahead of that and doing a conscious check-in. How do I feel? What do I need? How do I meet that need in an empowered way? And I get them to have a protein snack. So that's been the
Love
one that
that.
I've started weaving in and practicing already. And it's really beneficial. It takes a minute for those adrenals to just go, oh, I'm safe. I'm okay. Because women aren't ovulating when their brain doesn't think they're safe. Okay. We have a sensor in our brain that men don't have that is constantly saying, is it safe to make a baby? If it picks up in your blood because cortisol's too high or too low, or you've not got macronutrients, or the circadian rhythm is out, it's going to disrupt the ovulation, which is meant to protect you. It would have been a great contraceptive, but it's off all the time in our world, which means we're hormonally depleted. So women in their 20s and 30s are getting perimenopausal symptoms because they're not ovulating frequently enough, because this HPO axis, it's called, is disrupted.
Yeah. Wow. When you start looking at things like this, the connectedness of everything, I'm just thinking how much of a difference that would have made in my life if I knew this kind of stuff when I
Yeah.
was younger.
Yeah, this is one of the most frequent things I hear, because the way I work with women is very much about empowering them with information, because no one told us. All
Yeah.
my women say, why don't I know this? 5,000 years of patriarchy. It has removed the importance of a woman's cyclical nature and the power of it. And I look at women and I think, if we turn up like we do and show up like we do, when we're usually on our knees from a hormonal perspective and depleted, imagine what we could do if we were all feeling great. Imagine if all the women went, my energy is amazing, my libido is great, my mood is really regulated, I sleep beautifully. Can you imagine a world full of women like that?
Mm.
We live sadly in a world that benefits off of women not functioning optimally. There's a lot of money to be made from us constantly seeking solutions, needing to be on prescription medications like SSRIs and synthetic hormones. There is a lot of money in us not being optimally well. And that is a sad reality. So I I pushed my ADHD, rejection of the injustice and unfairness means I continue to stand on my soapbox and share information so that women can be empowered to make informed choices that make them feel good. Because as we were saying earlier, we were having a conversation about hysterectomies and how when body identical progesterone is properly balanced, you could negate the need for the vast majority of hysterectomy. So why aren't we doing that? It treats anxiety, it treats insomnia, it treats heavy bleeding, it treats PMDD, bipolar, schizophrenia, properly dosing progesterone. We've known this for decades. So why aren't we doing it? We have to question these things.
Yeah, I love what you are saying, because we're coming back to this old saying that the knowledge is power. If you do know something, then you can choose for yourself. You've got access to all the information to make that informed choice. And if you don't know, then you have to rely on people who are saying that they're experts and that they know what they're doing. But actually, it turns out that they don't know what they're doing, because there is so little training for doctors around this stuff.
Absolutely.
So it's almost like the blind leading the blind. And when we were talking earlier, the stuff that we were talking about, the body identical progesterone and my own experience of uterine fibroids, and how taking and using HRT really made it so much worse. And how I ended up last year in the hospital with a very critical anemia and having to have blood transfusions and operations.
That could have been avoided with progesterone.
And one of the things that you were saying about hysterectomy, that's definitely, I've been offered operations like that before. And one of the things that, comes from my deep belief is, can we look at all the other options? Can we just not focus on what can we cut out
Yeah, which is
really
out.
quickly? Which is normally said by male doctors. If I was taught so many times, if you don't want to have children, you might as well cut it out. It's, I think it's just puts it in perspective when we look at things like that.
It
Yeah.
really does. The system is so broken when it comes to women's health. I can't tell you. And this is not even the fault of frontline practitioners. They're trained in this misogynistic system and way. And often people say to me, I saw a woman doctor and she was she was a woman, but she was still awful. She's trained in a misogynistic system. It's not her in that way. And I used to defend prescribers a lot, but I don't now, because there is so much information there that there is no justification to be harming women through lack of knowledge and understanding about hormones. It's such a mess and it is harming women. And you're serving 50% of the population and their hormones are affecting everything. How many women have we got in waiting lists for rheumatoid arthritis type things? That could be a hormone deficiency. How many are in cardiology because of having palpitations? That could be a hormone deficiency. Let's deal with the hormones and see what we're left with. But we don't take that approach. The same with treating mental health. I believe if women had been allowed to be involved in the development and practice of medicine, instead of men practicing on men and men looking at men's problems, we would not be treating mental health with SSRIs. I think we would be looking at natural body identical hormones because they have a massive impact on mood, cognitive function, executive function. We know this. The work of Dr. Phyllis Bronson, the work of Dr. Katarina Dalton, incredible work around using hormones to treat these things. And yet
It makes complete sense when you say it how you just said it,
yeah.
and the conversation that we had today, like, it makes such a complete sense. Of course, it makes sense. If you are coming to your period and you are feeling depressed or around that time, like I used to have kind of a week in my cycle, a week where I was just like feeling absolutely awful. Of course, it makes sense to actually make that link.
And it's not just about the hormone levels, it's the ratios. So something that we've spoken about is estrogen dominance, okay, this pattern, and it doesn't mean you're producing too much. So what happens is women who have a similar experience to you, Anetta, around I have PMT, I have PMDD, because it's in that luteal phase, the second half of the cycle, where we think that's the only bit where progesterone comes in. We think we have a sensitivity to progesterone. That is not what I see. What I see clinically is estrogen dominance. We're not producing enough progesterone to keep the amount of estrogen we're producing in check. So we see this massive impact on mood in that phase of the cycle. And the solution is properly dosing on body identical progesterone. Dr. Katerina Dalton's work, she used progesterone to treat PMDD very effectively for a very long time. But we think it's the progesterone we're sensitive to, and it's not enough. We are always producing more progesterone in our body than estrogen throughout the whole cycle. We just get a massive surge of it when we ovulate. So it's produced in the adrenals, it's produced in the brain, it's produced in the nerves. We're always progesterone dominant. It's just we need a lot of it to keep this fiery little beast of estrogen in check.
Okay. So if I ask you, like, because I'm sure a lot of women who are listening to this conversation will be like, oh my God. What would be the first thing that you would advise somebody if they can really resonate with what you are saying? If they think, oh my God, that makes sense. What do I do with it now?
Something that's available to you, I would suggest testing with something called the mirror. It's at home, it's as accurate as blood tests, it's a urine test, and we will see exactly what your estrogen and progesterone levels are and see the ratios. So if that's an option, that's great. Blood tests aren't very helpful for estrogen and progesterone because hormones pulse. So 5 minutes later, it will read differently. But that's where I would start if that's an option. Otherwise, we want to start, you can replenish with over-the-counter creams. Wild jam doesn't work when it's taken transdermally. If you can get it taken herbally, I'd suggest with a medical herbalist, you can look at wild jam. But in terms, you look at ways to replenish the progesterone. So the over-the-counter creams, you just put it on and it can be quite supportive, particularly for things like PMT. The other thing is we want to boost the body's natural production of this. So for me, it comes back to adrenal health. What is happening with your adrenals? How is your nervous system? How are you supporting them to be able to focus on that? When we're looking at peri, if you're menstruating and ovulating in your 20s and your 30s, you want to optimize your ovulation. So we come back to this sensor feeling safe to ovulate. Are you eating regularly? Are you eating lots of processed food? Are you regulating your blood sugar levels? How are you moving your body? How are you honoring your sleep? Lots of people come to me and expect a really complex protocol. No, get these pillars of health right first and then see what you're left with. Yes, sometimes we have to do complex things around liver methylation or gut or things like that. But for most women, we're looking for this magic supplement. It doesn't exist. There is no supplement that's going to sort your hormones out. Okay. We need to take these basic pillars of health and think, how did our ancestors live? And weave as much of that into our life as possible. And then once that brain feels safe, you will optimize your natural progesterone production.
I want to laugh at this point because the amount of money I spent on supplements over the last few years. And it drives me absolutely insane because it's like they're so expensive, where you can buy the same supplement without anything mentioning about perimenopause or menopause.
Yeah.
You take the same thing, stick something for women and menopause symptoms or perimenopause symptoms, and it's double the price. And
no point. I mean, as long as your nervous system isn't already stressed out and you start chucking a load of supplements at it, because that is just adding more stuff for the nervous system to have to sort out. Okay. So supplementation can, in certain points, be useful for specific things. But what we do is we go, that sounds great. We chuck it all at the wall and hope something sticks. We have this supplement cupboard we've all got of the half finished, half open. Did I remember to take them? It just, particularly for ADHD people, if you can't take it consistently, don't bother, because they need consistency. Consistency is not our friend. If it doesn't, it's not in our line of vision, it doesn't exist. So we need supplements out and as few steps as possible to take them. But I feel the supplement industry has just become like the new pharmaceutical. I'll take this. But no, let's deal with these basic pillars of health first before we're spending £300 a month on supplements.
yes, I love what you are saying. And It's really coming back to basics. This is what I hear you say. Coming back to basics, having enough rest, eating when you're hungry and eating the right kind of stuff, the real food,
Yeah.
balancing the work and rest, having some connection with others, and really working towards the nervous system regulation kind of thing. And then obviously doing whatever you need to do around your hormones as well.
Yeah. Absolutely. It's simple. Let's keep it simple. We are overcomplicating everything. Keep it simple. We don't need any more stressful things in our lives to remember to do. And we don't need to be up at 5:30 in the morning doing the miracle morning, which works really well for men, not for women.
And the
We don't
younger
need,
people.
yeah, we don't need to be at boot camp. We don't need to do these things. If you like doing them, then wonderful. But this is what we've been programmed as women, that to be healthy, we must be brutal. We must be restrictive. We must be punishing. No, we need to nourish ourselves, whether that's the nervous system or the way we eat or how things feel. Or if it doesn't feel nourishing to you, it's out. This is not the season for that.
I love that. I
Mm.
love that. It really aligns with what I feel in every cell of my body, which is that it needs to be the season of really developing that kindness and self-compassion for myself, rather than disowning our bodies, disowning our needs, trying to do something from the outside in. My pet hate is always seeing a really young man trying to do fitness or some kind of stuff for women in the autumn of their lives. It's
Talking
like,
about the weight on your belly, and this is what you need to do. Please go away. No, no.
oh, thank you so much, Adele, for this conversation. Is there anything else that you feel would be really useful to add to this conversation for our listeners?
I think I'd like to weave in here, because it's something that's been coming up a lot in my community on Instagram, is how people feel about HRT. And I just want to take the shame away of it, because I am someone, I don't touch medication unless I have to. It's amazing that we have it, but I really very much in natural. I have no toxins in my home. This is my lifestyle. But I see quite a lot in spiritual communities, this shaming of women who choose HRT. And this is because of this real misunderstanding around it. And the women I see doing this are often women in a very privileged situation, where they're either not working, or they've carved out lives where if they don't sleep that night, it doesn't matter, or they're not having symptoms that someone is seeing. I believe women have been told that they should suffer on some level that is part of being a woman all their lives. Women should not have to suffer in perimenopause. There are lots of solutions we can look at. HRT is rarely the golden ticket, but it's a big part of it for lots of women. And I just feel, whether you choose HRT or you don't, let's take the judgment out. Why should a woman have to stop being intimate with her partner because she's in agonizing pain all the time? Why should she not sleep? Why should she have to leave her career because she doesn't have the cognitive function, and his inner critic is coming out loud that she can't do it? Why should any woman have to go out because someone in a more privileged position is shaming and judging her choice? So I just felt really called to speak to that, because it's something I'm seeing coming up in community, in that, let her, you do you, let her do her, whatever that looks like. And let's start collectively taking the shame and judgment out of the choices women make about their bodies. So yeah, I just felt to share that.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I think we can even extend it to any medication, antidepressant medication or antipsychotic medication, if you
Yeah.
have the need for that. And
Yeah.
that's the best way that you can be supported in that moment.
Yeah.
This is what it's there for. Our
Absolutely.
medical system is really wonderful, and we need to use it at some levels. And
Yeah.
just hearing you say that, even though my experience with HRT was not great because it wasn't really what I needed, I'm
No.
still open to looking at
Yeah.
very clearly needing to support my progesterone on some level. And
Yeah.
I am very open to
Mm.
whatever will make my life
Mm.
better, my sleep better.
Oh, sometimes a good night's sleep. We
Yes.
do a lot. And progesterone, if you're not sleeping, that's progesterone. You take progesterone and it's like, Oh, that was wonderful.
Yeah.
What? They denied that on some kind of like you have to trawl through some kind of traumatic experience of perimenopause. We've got enough, thanks. There's
Yeah.
enough to deal with here. We don't need to add to it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Thank you. Thank you for naming that. Very important thing. Okay, so Adele, if anybody wanted to find you, reach out to you, connect with you, find out more about your work, how can they find you?
Instagram is really the only tech I can get my head remotely around, and I'm just
Okay.
winging it over there. So you're very welcome to come and join my community and my frequent rants about women's health on there, and send me any messages if you've got questions. And my website is harmonizeyou.co.uk, and I'm Harmonize You on Instagram. So I've got lots of free resources on my website that you're very welcome to explore.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for this
Pleasure.
conversation. That's been very enlightening, and I'm sure it will be very helpful to many women within our community.
Thank you, Annetta. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Adele.